All right, so let's take a look at our troubleshooting application and see where some of our issues are. Now, this is a very simple application. We have a users tab where we should be able to create, update, and delete a user. So let's test it. Oh, down here we can click delete, and yes, let's delete it, and it works. Let's click update and add one there, and it works. Okay, and let's create a user. And this is, oops, and that works. So user is great. Okay, let's go look at blogs. Okay, let's update this first blog. Okay, and right off the bat, we see that it doesn't load. So let's fix this. Okay, so we go back to blogs, and what we're trying to do is we want to fix, when we click update, it's supposed to pass to the update. It's supposed to pass to the update file a get, which is the blog ID. Now, if we look down at the bottom in the URL, it says B1 log ID. Okay, and if we go to update, it says update.php B1 log ID equals, and there's nothing there, which is why nothing loaded. Okay, so let's take a look at the code. So we go to public, and we go to blog, and we go to index. And on our index page, right down here, it says B1 log ID. Now, that right there is an issue, because if we look at our update page, in our update page, it says we're looking for a variable named blog ID. So let's just copy that variable and go back over here and just paste that in. Okay. So let's see if that fixes it. Come over here, refresh the page. Let's just go back and look at the update. So it fixed the blog ID like it's supposed to, but it's still not passing in the variable. Okay. So let's go back and see why it's not passing in the variable. Notice, where's the variable coming from? Well, the variable is coming right here from blog. Okay, and this blog was created from the array that was developed from the find all from the blog class. So this blog's array, each row of that array is set here for each of the blogs. Okay, so let's go take a look at that class. So we look at the blog class, and we'll notice right off the bat there is no column name called blog, and instead, so go back to index here. Remember the object blog with the notation of the arrow is the column that it's supposed to be referencing. There is no column called blog. Instead, it's called blog ID. So let's just put that blog ID there and see if it fixes it. So let's go back to blog and highlight over update. And yes, it says blog ID number 3. So if we click that, and it loads it like it's supposed to. So that's one fix. Okay. Now let's make a change to it. Let's add an S on the end of this and see if it will update. And it does update. So now we know that update works. And let's look at delete. Let's delete Sumna, this one down here. Again, because we fixed the blog ID at the bottom, let's see if that works also. So yes, please delete. And Sumna is still there. So the delete did not work. Let's go take a look and see why. So if we go back to our code, we're done with the index. We know that works. Let's open up blog delete. Now in blog delete, the code comes in, it gets the blog ID, puts it into this blog ID, and finds it by ID. And we have the finds by ID, and we set whatever's in this array into blog. Okay, and then from there we get the blog name, and we know that works because it showed up. The Sumna showed up. Okay, when we say let's delete this, we know it works because this is showing up, which is what that does. Okay, when it says, hey, let's grab the name and let's put the name in there. So right here it says, are you sure you want to delete the blog Sumna? So we know that works. Okay, so why is this not working? Okay, so we come down, we know this all works. Okay, we come down here and we're looking on the post request. Now, what this post request does is when the person says, yes, I want to delete it, it submits the form, it posts back to delete. On the delete, it grabs everything out of here, and it deletes using the delete function that was built in the database object class. Okay. So we're inputting the name blog ID, and this is a hidden value so that when we post it, it comes back down here. Now look closely. What up here is not right? So our post variable, which is coming out of here, we called blog ID. Well, up here, we called it blog. So it's not getting, there is no name down here called blog. So what we need to do is change that to blog ID. Okay. Then it will take that blog ID, put it into the new variable blog ID. It comes into the array blog ID. The array gets passed into blog and deleted, and everything is very happy. Okay. So let's see if that works. Let's go back to blogs, look at Sumna, hit delete. Yes, please delete. And now Sumna is gone. So right there, we've just talked about very simply how to check your get variables and to check the variable names and to make sure that the names are right in the form itself. This name here corresponds to what you're posting here. Okay. And what you get here has to come from what you're pushing in the URL here. Okay, so that's a little bit of troubleshooting there. We're going to move on to the next issue. So we can update and we can delete. Now let's go ahead and look at our detail. So for Southern Fabric, let's look at the detail, and you'll see right away in detail, it's loading like it's supposed to because the blog ID is coming through. So it's loading like it's supposed to, but we get this fatal class contract not found. So when you see an error like this, this is not a syntax error. This error is saying, hey, you're calling a class or calling an object that doesn't exist. So let's go take a look at it. Let's see if we've actually initialized that object. So we could see that it does exist. Here's contract, and it looks great. However, if we go into initialize, we're missing it here. Okay, so that's where we need to initialize it at the top of every page. So let's just highlight that and call it contract, save it. And now when we go back and refresh this page, we just get a simple database query failure. So let's take a look at the contract index page and find out what query is failing and why. So we come over and we go down to contract and we go to index, and we have a couple queries. This is a query. This says go to the blog class and do the find by ID, which extends the database class here, and that find by ID is a function in the database class. So that is one query. We know that works. How do we know it works? Because this is populating here. Okay, so the one that's not working is the contract one that we're trying to load the contract. So we come down and here's our contract, and we're saying, hey, what's going on with this? So we have a special function called find contract, and we're passing in it the blog ID. Okay, so let's go to the contract class and look at find contract. So we go to contract class, and here's the find contract, and we're passing in ID. So what we can do is we can take this SQL statement, okay, and we can do one of two things. We can either isolate the SQL statement before it runs and see what it looks like, or we can try to run this SQL statement inside our code. So what you should do inside the SiteGround. So what you'll do is you just highlight the SQL statement, just the SQL statement. Okay, you don't need the PHP tags and stuff or the quotes. Highlight the SQL statement and go into SiteGround. Okay, go into your SQL. And we're just going to go into SQL, and it doesn't really matter where you are in the SQL because it's going to be, it will run anywhere. So you just say, hey, log this, and I'm going to say, I know Southern Fabric is 3, and I'm going to click go, and it gives me an error. It says, even if I put 300 here, and there isn't one, it will just return, it won't return an error, it'll just say it's an empty set. So we actually have an error, and it says here is your error. It says we do not know what the table is, contracts. I'm going, how do you not know what contracts is? I look over here and it's not named contracts, it's named contract. So there's two things you can do. You can create a new table called contracts, or you can use this table called contract and just remove the S and see if it works. It does work, no errors, didn't return anything, which is perfectly fine. We can edit it and say, show me number 3 and see if it returns what I want it to return. Oh, there it is, everything for Southern Fabric. It all works great. So what we need to do is go back to our code and simply remove the S. Control S to save. Go back to our blog and hit refresh, and all of our contracts show up. Okay, so that is how you isolate the what is being queried. Okay, so let's go into the update and see if this update works. Let's just add a 5 on this one and click submit, and that update works. And let's just delete this last one, and something happened. Okay, when I clicked delete, it didn't take me back to where I was supposed to go. So we were on the delete.php page, and it sent in the right contract ID. Okay, so contract, folder contract, delete, and we sent in the right contract ID. So let's take a look at it in the code. So we go to contract and delete. Okay, and here, the first thing we're doing right off the bat is we're getting the contract ID. Okay, and I could tell right off the bat that this get is looking for contract, but if I look at what we sent contract ID. So right off the bat, I can tell that's what the problem is. So what we're actually looking for is contract ID. Now, from the very beginning, contract ID. I'm not going to save it. Are you sure you want to delete the contract? If I did this right down here, I would have put something like with the name of the contract. Are you sure you want to delete this first contract? Which I never did, so you can't tell if this query is working. Okay. However, let's look and see if it works. There's contract ID. And what we're doing here is we're getting the blog ID, which is important. Okay. So we're using the contract, this SQL to get the blog ID for that contract. Okay. And then we're putting that blog ID and the contract ID inside as hidden variables inside, so we can use both of them in post. Okay. And where are we using them here? Well, we're using contract ID to delete it, and we're using blog ID to send us back to the right blog. Okay. So that's why we want to do it that way. Let's take a look. Well, let's actually save that first and come over here and go back. And now let's try to delete this and click yes. And it returns us back right where we're supposed to be without that fourth contract. So delete works, update works. Let's try add a contract. So let's just say the contract's for coming up and 110. Click submit. It did not add. Well, the add for this would be the create in contracts. So if we go to contract, why didn't it get added? Okay. So right off the bat, are we getting this blog ID? Let's look and see. We can't tell because when we highlight over this button, it says add a contract, but you can come up to the top and say, yeah, there is a blog ID and it's equal to 3. So let's look and see what else might be going on crazy here. So we go and we can just hide this post request. And do we put the blog ID, this blog ID here? Is it used down here? Yes, it's used here. It's used here. Those are correct. Okay. When we submit the page, are we submitting back to the create? Yes. So our problem has to be within the if post request itself. So let's just take a look. From the post request, are we getting payment date, payment amount, contract length, and blog ID? Let's check that they're spelled right. Payment date, payment amount, contract length, and blog ID. All the names are correct, so that is right. We run it through this little simple function. That looks correct. and we come down here and say, hey, let's create this array. And right off the bat, I'm seeing this orange variable, and it's supposed to be a variable, but it's not a variable because it's missing the $sign. So let's hit save. Because of that, it would not have created this. The whole thing would have just failed. So let's go ahead and try it again. Hit refresh. Okay, and let's pick a date, the 18th, 110, and hit submit. And it's still not working. So let's take a look at it. Add a contract. Let's just double check it. Okay, still not working. Come back over here and let's see why it's still not working. So I can't see anything wrong with this code and I don't know what to do. Well, what you can always do is say, you know what, let me isolate that query and see if the query is working, because we are still running the query, and the query here is the create query. Okay, so what we'll do is let's look at contract and go to the create and see what's going on. So in our database object class, okay, we go down to create, which is here, and what we want to do is just output the SQL statement before we run it. Okay, so here we're going to say, hey, give me the SQL as the result. Okay, and we'll just comment out the this if result part, and we'll just return the result, which would happen to be the SQL statement. That's it. So we say, hey, put together this whole SQL statement and return the result. Okay, so let's save that. Go back to our create page, and just like we could always do here, let's just set result is equal to, erase that contract on accident, and just echo out the result, which means echo out the SQL statement that gets passed back. Okay, go back to our code and refresh this page. Okay, and now let's pick the 25th, and let's pick our payment amount and our days. Click submit. And oh yeah, one other thing that we need to do is say don't leave the page. So if we leave the page, it sends us back to the page. We don't want that. We want to actually stay and see what the result is. So let's add one. Blog 3 is up here, which is perfect. So we know that variable is there. And let's submit it. And here is our SQL statement, okay, that we echoed out. So let's just copy that and see why it's not working. So we come over here back to our SQL and we paste that in, okay, and click go, and it throws an error. So there's an error, and the error says we cannot add or update a child row. The foreign key constraint fails. So let's look at our thing. Insert into contract, payment date, okay, which is payment date, contract length, payment amount, blog ID. Well, blog ID is our foreign key, and we're missing blog ID here. So why are we missing the blog ID? It's got to be something here. Well, maybe not. We are calling contract. Where does create get all of the variables to use in the actual statement? Well, if you look back at our database query, it says, hey, sanitize the attributes and grab me all of the attributes from the table, which takes us back to our contract class. It's grabbing them from here. Well, if we look at them, they're all right. Okay, blog ID, contract length, they're all right. Let's come down here and double check that they're right in our variables. Contract, payment date, yes, 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 they all look good. Let's double check. Contract ID, payment date, contract length, payment amount, blog ID. Here we accidentally named it blog. So it needs to be blog ID if we're bringing in blog ID from the array. So in this array here, we're calling it blog ID in the array. Okay, this is the array that we're bringing in on our construct. So here it needs to be blog ID. So let's just save that. And now let's run that create statement again and see if we can get it to put the right create statement. So I've got the blog ID 3. I'm just going to pick a date, hit submit, and now notice we have the right blog ID, which is 3. Okay, so let's undo the echoes and stuff like that and make sure it works. So now this contract is correct. Let's come over here and get rid of this result. We don't need that anymore, and we don't need to echo it out. Let's put the header back to where it was, and then on the create class, let's actually let it do its work. So come over here and just remove the return and put that back to normal. Okay, and let's see if it actually works. So let's go back one and click submit. And there it is, 418, 123, $12. So our create works, our update works, and our delete works for our blog. Okay, and let's look at reports. I don't think this is important. I don't see any errors, so I think we're good. So that's how you would isolate a query that's not showing that it's failing. It's just you just didn't know if it was supposed to fail or not. So let's go back to blogs and let's create a blog. We had this issue yesterday. Let's add in the big blog URL, thebigblog.com, email admin@thebigblog.com. First name is big blog. The domain authority, let's just say, is a 55. Number of sponsors 20. And let's do a couple check marks and click submit. Okay, and this is the big blog. Our quality score didn't calculate right. Well, let's look at the detail. Okay, still didn't calculate right. And let's go to update for it. You know, I put in these two. For some reason it's not coming over, and I think I even checked Green Fairy, and my first name's not showing up. So on my create, I've got some problems. So if I go to my database and look at my blog, that one I just created, it's missing the first name, and it didn't calculate all the scores correctly. So let's go take a look at that. So if we look under create for the blog, let's just see, it doesn't require anything to come in. We got the blog name, URL, email, contact, first name, last name, MozDA, sponsors. All that looks pretty good. This is where the quality score is actually calculated. Okay, let's come down here and say these are all post requests. So all of these should be the same thing that's further down in our form. All of these look right. Okay, now where am I getting this information to see if it supposedly looks right? If you go to blog, it's this information here. Okay, this information here is the same as this information here, here, and here. Where am I getting this information up here? Well, this is the name of the table, and this is the exact name of the columns exactly, meaning uppercase, lowercase, all of that, exactly of what's in the database. Okay, so if I look at blog and I go to structure, this structure and how these are all named are exactly how they're supposed to be named along the top here. Okay, and that's the same here also. So let's go back to create and come down and look. And this is not create the blog. This is, we're looking at create for the blog. Good, we're here. Come down here and look, and let's start looking at the names. This name, that's good. This one's good. This one's good. This one's good. This one's good. Oh, this one right here has a 1 in it. It's not supposed to have a 1 in it. Sponsor, FQ shop, up, G Ferry, and M star. So we were missing a bunch of ones. And why is first name not working? Okay, because first name was supposed to work. So let's come up here and look. Contact first name, first name. Okay, so that one should work. Let's save that. And let's also look at update and make sure update is right. All the names look right on update. Okay, let's just test it and see if it worked. So we go back over here and add the, and $55, $20, update. And the big blog is getting a quality score, which is good. And let's actually create a new one. Quality score is still 0. If we go to update, we're still having an issue. And it's still not liking the contact first name. Okay, so if I add a contact first name here, update, it's working now. On update it works, but on create it does not work. Let's go back and look at why on create it doesn't work. So on create, contact F name, okay, so that's here, F name, contact F name is here, okay. So let's go back to our blog class, and let's look at our contact F name is correct here, it's correct here, it's correct here. We got a 1 over here. And someone messed with this page too. Let's look and see. Right here under our Moz score, we got a 1 there also. It's going to throw things. Okay, quality score. Alright, just checking them. That looks right. Alright, let's test out our new create. Create a blog. Call this last test. Last. Click submit. Still getting a 0 for our quality score. Let's take a look for the update, and number of sponsors is still 0. But we did get contact first name, and we did get the Moz score working. So let's look at number of sponsors. So sponsors, and sponsors is right up there. Come down here, up, we got a 1 in sponsors over here. So let's get rid of that 1. I just misspelled it right there. And save that. And let's add that back in so it doesn't throw an error. Let's just delete a couple of these. And let's create a new one. The last test. And we're still getting a 0. Let's see. Under update, we're getting these still work. We're missing quality score. Okay, so let's find out why quality score is not working. Go back, and I'm looking right here into the blog class, and I can see it right there. As quality score has a 1 in it. Man, you have to be super careful checking that these all are named right. Okay, so now we can go back, and it's going to work. So I know I've been talking for a while, but I just want to, kind of give you a heads up. Look, it's very important to have these named right. Sometimes it's not a syntax error. Sometimes it's just a logic error. Sometimes things aren't named right. Okay, I've seen it where all of these variables, they all looked right, but they all look like this. And it was very hard to tell that they were wrong. You have to remember to put a $sign on the front of all of them. All right, I hope this helps a little bit with the troubleshooting. Just think logically, why is this not working? It's got to be something that's between here and here, and 1 + 1 + 1 is always equal to 3. Okay, so these always work. Okay, it's not magic. All right, have a great day, and hopefully this troubleshooting video helps you a little bit.